And I'm like at the front, sitting on the front step, talking to the husband, because the wife won't even talk to me anymore by this point. And I'm like talking to the husband and trying to wrap up. I'm like, hey, well, you took 10% deposit, so we have this much left. Like, okay, let's just wrap this up and we'll get out of your hair forever. And the husband, whatever his name was, he's like, Mike, thanks for completing the project, but based on everything that happened, I only want to pay you half. I think you've only earned half. And I was just, again, devastated. I'm like, what are you talking about? Half?
Welcome to the Painter Growth Podcast, where we help you scale your painting company in record time. Join us as we explore sales, marketing, hiring, finances, leadership, and more, everything that you need to know to scale and grow your painting business. I hope you enjoy and subscribe.
What's up, everybody? Mike Hickman here, founder of PainterGrowth.com, and y'all are listening to the Painter Growth Podcast, and another solo episode coming at you today, this beautiful Friday. So what are we going to be talking about today? Well, I want to tell you a little bit of a story. And I don't know how good of a storyteller I am, but you guys can let me know if you think it's good or not. But I want to tell you a story about my own personal house from hell. You know, we all have that house from hell that we think about whenever someone says that word. Someone says house from hell, boom, that one project came up in your mind. That project where everything went wrong. Nothing went right. You lost money. Painters quit. You got hurt. You went over budget. You lost money. All this stuff. It was the house that never ended. Right. And so what I want to do today is walk you through my story of my own house from hell. And while we do that, make the topic around the 5 lessons that I learned from my house from hell. Because whenever something bad happens, there's always a lesson to be gleaned from it. And I've thought about this project a lot over the last, 10 years, because it was about 10 years ago, a little more than that, maybe 12 years ago. But it still lives with me, right? As fresh as if it happened last week. Now, I still remember where I was standing when I booked this job. I was in my kitchen, leaning over the island, and I got a text message, and it was right near the end of my first year painting, right? And so I got this text message that I just won this bid for $6,500. And 13 years ago or 12 years ago, whatever it was, $6,500. That was a big job. I was stoked on it. It was a full exterior. It was like this walkout basement bungalow stucco home. It was about an 80-year-old house. Stucco, old 100-year-old window, 100-year-old windows. Those storm windows, the wooden ones, that kind of the frame pops out and you can paint both sides of them, and you got to paint the inside frame. And then there was like the back deck and everything like that. So we got the whole project, and I was so excited, just really like capping off this super busy first summer of painting. So a couple weeks later, we pressure wash it, whatever. A couple weeks later, we get to the project to start painting, and things start going well, but that's about when things stop going well. So I can't remember exactly step by step when things started to go south, but sure enough, they did, because before long, the homeowners were starting to get frustrated. They were leaving a list of deficiencies on the tape to the front door every single day. I had a painter fire up the sprayer with trim paint and start spraying a wall with semi-gloss. I'm like, oh my gosh. I had a couple of painters quit on me because it was towards the end of the summer. They wanted to go back to school. They quit on me, so I had to get back on the tools. So I'm rolling up my sleeves, getting my hands dirty again, which is the last thing that I wanted to do. At the end of the summer, I wanted to enjoy my August. And one of the things that went wrong right near the start is that I had this new painter who just, I don't know why I trusted him. I guess I was kind of operating in that fight or flight mode where, I needed someone, and, in my opinion, 2 feet in a heartbeat was all I needed. And one of the aspects of the project that we had bid on and won is that, in these 100-year-old or 80-year-old storm windows, the putty had to get redone. So if you guys know the putty, it's not like spackle. It's like this. It's quite hard. It's like Play-Doh, but it's like hard Play-Doh, and you got to like roll it into a snake, and then you like put it all along the edge of the window, and then you take your flat edge tool and you push it down so that like it smooths it all out. It makes like a nice triangle, like a perfect triangle profile in the edge of the window. And you can't like smear it with your thumb or anything because it gets lumpy, right? If you've ever used it before. And it takes a little while to cure, I think overnight or 2 days. But it cures very hard, like rock hard, which is why we use it to hold in these old windows. So I used this opportunity to train this new painter how to do it. And I showed him on one window, and then he did it, and he did it fine, right? So I saw him do it, and then I went off to go do my own thing. And I probably left him, there was like, there was maybe 20 windows that he had to do the full putty for on the exterior of all of these windows, because it sit on the inside, they sit against the wood, and then the outside, the putty to hold it in. And anyway, I go back like 2 days later to see the work that he did. And it turns out that for every single window, he stopped using the straight edge because he couldn't figure out the straight edge, I guess. And he didn't talk to me about it, but I didn't check on him for 2 days. But I went back and he had actually used his thumb to flatten out the putty all the way along the window frame. And so what ended up happening is that you could see like the thumb imprint. It was like thumb press, thumb press, thumb press, thumb. So it's like all these like grooves going up and down all these 100-year-old windows. And he had done like 15 of these windows, and I didn't go back and check because I was so busy worrying about everything else on the project. And if you know anything about this putty, this is not something you can just scrape out. So I'm like, holy crap. First, like biggest thing that went wrong in my painting business. I'm like, first of all, these are irreplaceable windows because they are, they're 100-year-old. We can't just remake 100-year-old windows. They all lose their appeal and all that thing. So what I ended up having to do, and it was not a good thing, is I ended up having to rent a belt sander. And this was the only thing that I could think of to figure it out. So I rented a belt sander, and I like figured out how to like put these windows up on the ground, and I belt sanded all of this putty to try to get all of these thumb marks out of it. And it ended up working pretty good. But I actually, in doing that, I ended up scraping like a ton of these windows. Like the belt sander just raked against the window. I ended up scraping a bunch of them. And homeowners were not too happy with that because these weren't like the new window panes. These were those 80-year-old window panes that had they were like handmade, right? They had the nice like waviness to them. You can't just replace an old window like that with a new one because they lose that like hand waviness that you used to get. Now they're just too perfect. So anyway, homeowners were not super stoked about that. And this leads to lesson 1 that I learned. I mean, there was probably some other lessons, but I had to pick 5, right? So lesson 1, over delegating only leads to problems. So what I've learned there, and then, since then, many, many times, is that delegating is, part art, part science. So there's a very specific structure to how you should delegate. And there's an acronym that we used to follow that was kind of like our delegating format. And I didn't follow it as well as I should have here. But it's the delegating format that we use is, and I didn't make this up, is DORAGI, DORAGI. So D, do the thing, right? Demonstrate. O, observe. So observe them doing the thing. R, redemonstrate. So you get to show them a second time. A and G, assign goal. So it's 2 of them together. A, G, assign goal. And then after they finish that goal, the I is inspect. Right. And so what I did demonstrate and observe, and then I took off. Right. So demonstrate, observe, redemonstrate, assign a goal, and inspect. I didn't redemonstrate. I didn't assign a goal. I didn't inspect. I just saw them, observed them doing it. I'm like, okay, I'm good. So I learned early on, very expensive mistake, that over delegating leads to problems. You need to follow that framework, right? There's a difference between delegating and dumping. And I was very much dumping there because I was overwhelmed. I had a million things to do. And I should have taken that extra time. It would have saved me hours and hours and hours of trying to fix that problem, right? So I skipped it. I took a shortcut and ended up paying dearly for it. Another side thing, this wasn't a huge problem, but I don't know if any of you have ever experienced this before, but while he was doing all of putty, he laid all of these windows down out on the grass, on the lawn. And It was hot. One of the days was really hot, so it was like very sunny. And what ended up happening is that those old windows ended up magnifying the sun into the grass. And when he pulled up all of the windows that were there all day, it left like all of these brown burn marks, brown square rectangular burn marks all over the grass. It looked awful. So that was another thing that went wrong. So I guess that was, there's a bonus lesson for you. Don't put window frames on the grass on a hot day because they will burn holes in it. Anyway, so the next thing is as we were doing the project, I was obviously on the site and I had to go I do some of the hard ladder placements because my guys, they're getting, sick of this job. We're on it for like a couple of weeks by now, and like it's not going well. And on the back of the house, there was like this lean-to, or whatever you want to call it, just like this like leaning roof attached to the house, and it was like that corrugated aluminum roofing. And what I needed to do is I needed to paint, scrape, and prime this window frame that was above this awning. That's the word I was looking for, awning. So we like looked at it and tried to brainstorm how we had to do this, how we wanted to do this thing, because ladder placement seemed like impossible. But what we ended up deciding is we took like a board, like a 2x8 or a 2x10 or whatever it was, and we laid it across the awning, and we screwed it down into the joists, into the awning roof joists. And then what I got to do is I got my aluminum multi-way ladder and I brought it over and I put it on the roof joist. And that let me climb up and do the window. So I put the ladder on, went back, got my can, got my scraper, got my brush, went on, climbed up the ladder. And I started, this is where my lesson 2 comes in. Because I started scraping the window and I brushed it off and then I primed it and, all of that stuff, and it looked great. As I'm coming down off of this ladder, I go to step onto the board. But what I didn't realize is that I had screwed the board too close to the wall. So the ladder was too vertical. And as I was coming down, stepping onto the board, the ladder starts coming off the wall and I start falling back and I go, oh crap. And so what happened is I went back and I hit the awning and I fell through the awning another 10 feet down and I landed onto a lawnmower on a concrete pad. So what I did is I kind of went back this way, and just like however my body made me go is I went this way and I went to go catch my fall in my hand, and I ended up landing on my wrist and actually dislocating my lunate, which is like the little bone in the middle of your wrist. And you can actually see that. I'm just showing the camera here. Let's see if I can see it. It's a little while ago. So right there, this like nice little scar. And so I ended up having to get emergency surgery to fix it because it was a pretty major injury. It's dislocating your wrist is much worse than breaking your wrist. So I dislocated my wrist, and still bugs me, whatever, 12, 13 years later. But so the lesson that I learned there is that always tie off your ladders, especially when they're over 10 feet high. So that was another lesson I learned. Always tie off your ladder. So one of my painters, actually 3 of my painters, were sitting having lunch in the backyard there on like the client's lawn furniture or whatever. And they saw this happen. They saw me fall. And so I fall through the roof and I like hit the ground and I just like, I'm completely silent. I'm in so much pain. I just grab my wrist. And I'm like, oh, I'm just like grunting and like rocking back and forth. And one of my painters, Nigel, he goes, hey, Mike, are you okay? Do you need to go to the hospital? I'm just like, no, I'm good. Yeah, we should go to the hospital. So we hop in his car. He takes me to the hospital, just like it was a couple blocks away, which was pretty convenient. Get all casted up, come back to the house a few hours later. And as I'm walking back to the homeowner's house, they're on the homeowners are on the front lawn, expecting our arrival. And as they get back, as I walk up, like we get out of the car, walk towards them, first thing out of the wife's mouth is, what are you going to do about the roof? Oh, so defeated. Not, hey, Mike, hope you're okay. Hey, Mike, how are things? Hey, Mike, how you feeling? No, what are you going to do about the roof? Oh, man, I was devastated. Okay, I got hurt. Windows got messed up. We still got to finish this project. All right, by now, I'm like running the numbers on like every day or every couple of days. I'm like, there's no way that we're making money on this. So we ended up grinding out the rest of this job. There's a few other mistakes that happened. Like one of my new painters as well, what he did is like also when we were putting these storm windows back, he had actually painted, I don't know if you guys know anything about these storm windows, but on the outside edges of the storm windows, you're not supposed to paint them, and you're not supposed to paint where the storm window touches the window frame, because that's where that's how it pressure fits in, right? And it expands and contracts with the weather and stuff. And if you paint the outside edges and the bottom edges, then the storm windows aren't going to fit anymore. Anyway, what do you think my painter did? He painted the windows. He painted the edges of the windows. He painted the edges of the frame. So now there's like 8 coats of paint more on the edges of the windows and the frames, like combined. So 2 coats on either side of the windows, 2 coats on either side of the frames. So it's like 8 more coats of paint, and the frames don't fit into the house anymore. So my guys are like banging the windows back in with mallets, and in doing that broke a window. Anyway, that was not good. So anyway, every day here while we're wrapping up the project, like even throughout the whole project, I'm just so stressed because I'm running the numbers and I'm like, this job makes no sense. It ended up being like hundreds of hours. And if you I think it was like a 200-hour project. And if you think back, the project was like, like $6,500. So even there, that's like $32 an hour, which is, materials, labor, everything. I'm definitely losing money. And then to make matters worse, like finally we get into the last stage of the job. We're closing it up, and I mean, the house looks great. The colors look great. It ended up, mostly working out, other than those mistakes along the way, except we're way over budget on time, materials. And I'm like at the front, sitting on the front step, talking to the husband, because the wife won't even talk to me anymore by this point. And I'm like talking to the husband and trying to wrap up. I'm like, hey, well, you took 10% deposit, so we have this much left. Like, okay, let's just wrap this up and we'll get out of your hair forever. And the husband, whatever his name was, he's like, Mike, thanks for completing the project, but based on everything that happened, I only want to pay you half. I think you've only earned half. And I was just, again, devastated. I'm like, what are you talking about? Half? And I can't remember what I did, if I took half or if I negotiated back up a little bit more. Like I wasn't in any sort of mental capacity to go to small claims court or put a lien or anything like that. I was just like breaking down. My body, my soul, my heart, my passion for the business, like everything was like, what am I doing? Why am I doing this? Right? So, I mean, lesson number 3 there is don't underbid your jobs, right? That's a pretty obvious one, but like throughout that, like initially this project should have been so much more money. Even without all of those mistakes, it probably should have been a $10,000 job, or maybe even $11,000 job, with all of like the repair work and the carpentry and the paint that we were doing and everything, tough ladder placements. So yeah, number 3, don't underbid your jobs. So if you don't know how to bid a project, take that extra time to figure out how to bid that project, because winning a bid that is less money than it should be is worse than not winning that bid at all. Anyway, I'm pretty sure that during that conversation, I just like broke down in tears in front of this guy. I'm like, dude, this is insane. This was like the hardest 3 weeks of my life. We could have quit at any time. Like, anyway, so I learned a lot about myself during this project, like, what my breaking point was, what I was capable of. And that brings me to really lesson number 4. This is the lesson number 4 that I learned. And I don't know if I really learned it here, but it was definitely a muscle that I was exercising, and that was tenacity and grit and not giving up. And the lesson that as I was reflecting on this before this recording, is that it's easier to give up in the short run, but it'll only hurt you in the long run. And you only have to give up once, right? So it's that much. You don't have to do it one time. Just give up once and you're done with it. But to keep going, you have to choose to keep going every single day. And what I didn't know at that time, but what I would learn, and self-realize over the coming years and the decade, is that project was like a fundamental building block of my life and my work ethic and my self-value and self-worth. Because I knew that if I could get through a project like that, regardless of my own shortcomings and fault. And, it was 100% my fault, every mistake that happened there. They were totally solvable. It was not the homeowner's problem. It was my leadership and my problem solving and picking off more than I can chew and all that stuff, right? But it would have been so easy to give up. But if I gave up, I wouldn't be here today. I wouldn't have this business. I wouldn't have this podcast. I wouldn't have been able to, I would have shut down my painting business. I wouldn't have pursued any sort of career in painting. I would have probably not even gone back into business. But I'm not that type of person. I'd rather do the hard thing and reap those rewards later. So I could have saved money, right? I could have given up. But again, I don't do that. I don't give up. But like I said, you only have to give up once, but to keep going, you have to choose to keep going every single day. And it's much harder. And I guess that just brings me to the fifth and final lesson out of this story is that mistakes are how we learn. So if you don't make mistakes and you're just always doing the good thing and everyone's just nodding and smiling and you're going along life and just everything is easy, you don't really learn much, right? You just, you keep moving and you get older and whatever. But I learned a lot about business, about finance, about leadership, about delegation, like I said, about tenacity and grit, about finishing what you start during that project. And I wouldn't be, the same person or the same man I am today without having gone through that project and experiencing those failures and making those mistakes. And unfortunately, that homeowner and that household had to be the guinea pig for my mistakes. But I did my best and I finished the project as good as I could. And I mean, that was that. It was life-changing experience, at the time in an awful way. But as we kind of went on and on in the years, it turned out to be a really good thing because you know what? I never underbid a project again, at least not to that extent. I was more careful about those types of projects. I never over delegated. So my painters, I never put my painters in one of those situations where they're trying to do something that they didn't know how to do that was beyond their skill. I never fell off another ladder. That's for sure. I mean, I'm still relatively tentative about heights now. I never was before that, but then once I went through that roof, oh man, you really think twice about ladders. And I know there's some people listening who have fallen off ladders before, and holy smokes, it is not fun. And just the way that you look at ladders with a whole new level of respect after that, never changes. Anyway, with that being said, this podcast is a little bit different, and what I want you to do is that if you resonated with any part of the story, I want you to open up Spotify, and there's a little Q&A section, and I just want you to tell me just a couple sentences about your worst house from hell. It'll just take you a second. It's a really cool interaction feature with the podcast that really helps us grow. And if you don't even have time for that, just go into Spotify or go into Apple and just give us a quick 5-star review. That literally takes 5 seconds. And that really helps us grow. So if you resonated with the story, if you've gone through a house from hell, if you maybe learned one of the lessons that I talked about today, or you have a different lesson that you learned from your own house from hell, just like do a quick interaction with the podcast, either give us a review or a quick couple of sentences in the Q&A part below. But with that being said, happy Friday, guys. Enjoy your weekend. And thank you so much for tuning in. Peace.
Thanks for listening to the Painter Growth Podcast. If you want to grow your painting business, go to www.paintergrowth.com or click on the top link in the description. Talk soon.